My dad looked at me across the table and said, "She's your family now." Then my stepmother slid a paper toward me. My trust fund was written at the top. My name was already printed at the bottom. All I had to do was sign. If I did, everything my mom left me would be gone. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask a question, because the way they were looking at me, this wasn't a discussion. It was a plan. What they didn't know was, my mom had already seen this coming, and she didn't just leave me money. She left something in writing. The table was already set when I walked in. No one was eating. That's when I knew this wasn't dinner. My dad was sitting at the head of the table, both hands flat against the wood like he'd already made up his mind. My stepmother sat beside him, a pen placed neatly next to her plate, waiting. For me. I stopped in the doorway. "Did I miss something?" I asked. My voice came out calm. Too calm. Neither of them answered right away. My dad glanced at her. That was enough. Whatever this was, it had already been decided. "Sit down," he said. Not loud, not angry. Just final. I pulled out the chair across from them and sat. The air felt heavier than it should have. Like the room already knew something I didn't. My stepmother reached into the folder beside her plate and pulled out a stack of papers. Clean, printed, perfectly aligned, prepared. She slid the top page across the table. It stopped right in front of me. "Go ahead," she said softly. "Just read it." I didn't touch it right away. I just looked. My name was already printed at the bottom. The date was filled in. All that was missing was my signature. Slowly, at the top, in bold, were the words, "Transfer of beneficiary interest." My chest tightened. "Dad," I said. He didn't look at me. "It's just a formality," my stepmother said, her tone smooth, practiced. "We've already talked about this." I looked up. I repeated. That's when my dad finally met my eyes. "She's your family now," he said, no hesitation, no doubt. Just a sentence that felt like it had been sitting there, waiting for the right moment to land. Something inside me went very still. I looked back down at the paper. The number was there, every dollar my mom had left behind. Every dollar she had protected, while she was getting weaker, while she was still trying to smile at me like everything was going to be okay. And now it was sitting on this table like it belonged to someone else. "We're not asking for everything," my stepmother continued gently. "Just enough to help the family." I didn't respond. "Brianna's tuition, the house repairs," she added, "things that matter. Things that matter." I let that sit for a second. My dad shifted in his chair. "It's the right thing to do," he said, still not really looking at me. That part mattered more than anything. He wasn't forcing me. He was avoiding me. And somehow that made it worse. I ran my finger along the edge of the paper. The ink was fresh. The decision wasn't. "You already filled it out," I said. My stepmother smiled. "We didn't want to make it complicated for you." Complicated, like this was supposed to be simple. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just listened. To the silence. To the ticking clock on the wall. To the way both of them were watching me, waiting for the moment I would give them what they wanted. And then I noticed something. My dad's hand. It was shaking, barely, but it was there, and suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't just her idea. And it wasn't fully his either. It was something he had allowed. Because it was easier than saying no. A memory surfaced, quiet, unexpected. "Some people don't hurt you because they want to," my mom had once said. "They hurt you because they don't know how to stand up for you." Back then, I didn't understand what she meant. Now I did. I looked at the pen beside the plate, perfectly placed. Ready. Everything about this moment was ready. Except me. I picked up the pen, not to sign, just to feel it. Both of them leaned forward slightly. They thought this was it. I held the pen above the paper. Paused. For a second, I imagined it. Signing, handing it back, watching everything become easier for them. Then I imagined something else. My mom, sitting at a different table, months ago, weaker, thinner, but still writing things down when she thought I wasn't looking. She hadn't been confused. She hadn't been careless. She had been preparing. For this, I set the pen back down, exactly where it had been. I need some time, I said. My stepmother's smile didn't move, but her eyes changed. I looked at the paper one last time, then at my dad. Little, he nodded. Too quickly. Okay, he said. That's fine. That was the first time that night he sounded unsure. I stood up, pushed the chair back in, and walked out. No one stopped me. Behind me, I could feel them watching, waiting. Like this wasn't over. They were right, it wasn't. Upstairs, I closed my door quietly, the same way she used to. Then I walked to my suitcase, opened it, and pulled out the small wooden box I hadn't touched in weeks. Inside, under a folded scarf, was a piece of paper, a name written in my mom's handwriting. Patricia Drayton. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone. And for the first time, I knew exactly what to do. I didn't call her right away. I just stood there in my room, phone in my hand, staring at the name like it might change if I looked at it long enough. Patricia Drayton. The way my mom had written it, steady, careful, like she had known this name would matter one day. Downstairs I could hear them. Muffled voices. My stepmother first, sharp, controlled. The way she sounded when she thought she was still in charge. She hesitated, she said. Like that was the problem. My dad's voice came after, lower. Tired. She just needs time. Time. That word again. I leaned against the door and closed my eyes for a second. They weren't worried. Not really. They were just adjusting the plan. That's when it hit me. This wasn't the first step. It was just the first time they'd said it out loud. I opened my eyes, looked back at the paper in my hand. My mom didn't leave a list of instructions. She left one name. That meant something. I unlocked my phone and dialed. It rang once, twice, then a voice answered. Drayton Law Offices. Professional. Direct. I almost hung up, not because I was scared, because saying it out loud would make it real. My name is Morgan Ingram, I said. There was a pause. Not long, just enough. I've been expecting your call. The voice said. That stopped me. Excuse me. Your mother asked me to expect it, she clarified. Safe. I glanced at my door. Locked. Yes! Good, she said. Then tell me what happened. And I did. Not everything. Not the whole story. Just the part that mattered, the paper. The signature. The way my dad had said it, like it was already decided. She didn't interrupt. Didn't react. When I finished, there was a brief silence. Then, did you sign anything? No. Good. Not relief. Not surprise. Just confirmation. Like she had expected that answer too. They're going to push again, she said calmly. Probably soon. I leaned against the wall. How do you know? Because people like that don't prepare paperwork unless they think they can win. People like that. She didn't say stepmother. She didn't say father. She didn't have to. They said it's just a formality, I added. There was a quiet exhale on the other end. It isn't, she said. Simple. Final. If you sign that document, she continued, you are transferring control of your trust. Not temporarily, not partially, completely. My grip tightened around the phone. Everything? I asked. Yes. No hesitation. They would be able to access it, use it, redirect it. She paused. And you wouldn't be able to reverse it. The room felt smaller. They said it was just to help the family. They always say that, she replied. Not bitter, not emotional, just certain. I swallowed. So what do I do? Another pause. But this one felt different, measured. Right now, she said. You do exactly what you've been doing. Witches? You don't sign anything, you don't agree to anything, and you don't let them rush you. Rush. That word landed harder than the rest. Because that's exactly what it had felt like. A moment designed to close before I had time to think. They're gonna make it feel urgent, she added. They'll bring up money, responsibility, family. I let out a quiet breath. They already did, I know, she said, again, not surprised. Your mother was very clear about that, she continued. Something in my chest shifted. What do you mean? Drayton said. Not the exact conversation, but the pattern. She knew your father, she added gently. And she understood how easily someone else could influence him. I didn't say anything, because I didn't need to. I had just seen it. At some point, she continued, they're going to try something more direct. Like what? A deadline, pressure, possibly even involving other family members. That made my stomach tighten. They'll try to make you feel isolated, she said. Like you're the one creating a problem. I looked at the door again, like they were already doing that. And I'm not, I asked quietly. Longer this time. No, she said, not soft, not loud, just certain. You're protecting what your mother built for you, she continued. That's not selfish. That's exactly what she intended. For the first time since dinner, something inside me steadied. Not relief. Clarity. Your mother didn't leave anything unprotected, Drayton added. What does that mean? Another pause. This one intentional. It means, she said slowly, there are things in place that they don't know about. My grip tightened again. Like what? Silence. Then, we'll talk about that in person. Of course, not everything over the phone, I asked. Soon, she said. I'll arrange a time with your aunt. Aunt June. That made sense. Until then, she added, you don't tell them you called me? Why not? Because the moment they realize you're not alone in this, she said, they'll change their approach, change the plan, again, and suddenly, I understood something else. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. Good, she replied. Then, softer, your mother trusted you to handle this moment. That landed differently, not pressure, trust. I'll call you tomorrow, she said, just to check in. Okay. The line went quiet. I lowered the phone slowly. For a few seconds I just stood there, listening, thinking downstairs the house had gone quiet, too quiet, like they were waiting again, but this time, so was I. I walked to my desk and placed the paper with Drayton's name back inside the wooden box. Carefully. Then I closed it. Not because I was done. Because I was ready. A knock came at my door. I froze. Yeah? I called out. The door opened slightly. My stepmother stood there. Her expression was calm. Have you thought about it? She asked. I met her gaze. Yeah, I said. A small pause. And? I didn't look away. I just need a little more time. For a second, something in her face tightened. Then it was gone. Of course, she said. But this time, it didn't sound like patience. It sounded like calculation. She nodded once and closed the door. I stood there, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, and for the first time since my mom died, I didn't feel like I was falling behind. Because now, I knew something they didn't. They had a plan. But so did she. The next morning, nothing felt different. And that was the first sign that something had changed. My stepmother was in the kitchen, making coffee like she always did. My dad was at the table scrolling through his phone. No tension, no raised voices, no mention of the paper. Like the conversation from last night had already been settled. Morning, I said. My dad glanced up. Morning? Normal? Too normal. My stepmother smiled as she poured coffee into her mug. You sleep okay? I nodded, yeah. She didn't ask anything else, didn't mention the paper, didn't mention my answer. That was the second sign. They weren't pushing, not yet, which meant they were doing something else. I grabbed a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and watched them without making it obvious. My dad avoided eye contact. My stepmother didn't. She held my gaze for just a second longer than necessary. Then she looked away. Like she already knew how this was going to end. That feeling stayed with me all the way to school. Not fear. Not exactly. More like waiting. The first message came during second period. Unknown number. You should really think about helping your family. This isn't a good look. I stared at the screen. No name. No explanation. But I didn't need one. I already knew. By lunch, there were 3 more. Different numbers. Same tone. Your dad's doing his best. Don't make things harder. Your stepmom is trying to keep things together. You should respect that. Family helps family. Don't forget that. Family helps family. That phrase again. I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. Across from me, my friend Tessa frowned. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. She didn't believe me. But she didn't push either. That was the thing about people who actually cared. They didn't force answers out of you. They waited. Unlike the people texting me. By the time I got home, there were 8 messages. 8. None of them asked what I wanted. They just told me what I should do. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. I set my bag down and walked into the living room. My dad was on the phone. He stopped talking when he saw me. That told me everything. Yeah, he said quickly into the phone. I'll call you back. He hung up. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then, school okay? He asked. Normal again. Yeah. He nodded. Like that was enough? I almost laughed, because now I could see it. They weren't coming at me directly anymore. They were going around me. Using other people. Making it bigger. Making it harder to say no. That evening my phone rang. This time. It wasn't an unknown number. It was my grandmother. I stared at the screen for a second before answering. Grandma. Her voice came through immediately. Shorten. Morgan, what's going on? Straight to it. I leaned against the wall. What do you mean? Don't play that game with me, she said. Your father told me everything. Of course he did. He said you're refusing to help the family. She continued. Is that true? I closed my eyes for a second. He told her everything. Just not the right version. The money is in a trust. I said carefully. I can't just. You can. She cut in. If you really wanted to. There it was. Not a question. A judgment. Your father is under a lot of pressure right now, she continued. And your stepmother has been doing everything she can to hold things together. I didn't respond. Because I knew where this was going. And instead of helping, she added, you're making things harder. Harder. I let out a slow breath. I'm not trying to make anything harder, I said. I'm just not signing something I don't understand. Silence. Then, you understand enough, she said. No anger, no yelling, just disappointment, which somehow felt worse. Family takes care of each other, Morgan, she added, that phrase again. Only now it felt heavier, like it was being used as proof. I opened my eyes and stared at the wall in front of me. Did he tell you what the paper actually says? I asked. A pause. Then, he said it's about helping with expenses. Of course. Did he tell you I'd be giving up control of everything my mom left me? I asked. Lanugger this time. That's not how he explained it, she said. I almost smiled. Yeah, I said quietly. I didn't think so. The silence stretched. For a second I thought she might ask more questions. She didn't. I just think you should think carefully about this, she said instead. Decisions like this, they affect more than just you. Then she hung up. No goodbye. I lowered the phone slowly, and just stood there. That was the moment it became clear this wasn't just my dad. This wasn't just my stepmother. This was bigger now. They had turned it into something else. A family issue. A pressure system. And I was right in the middle of it. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Don't be selfish. I stared at it. Then I locked the screen. Not because it didn't matter. Because it did. Too much. I walked upstairs, closed my door, and sat on the edge of my bed. For a second, everything felt loud. The messages, the calls, the way people who weren't even in the room were now part of the decision. This was what Drayton had meant. Pressure. They weren't trying to convince me anymore. They were trying to wear me down. I reached for my phone. Scrolled back to her number, paused. Then I typed a message instead. They've started involving other people. I hit send. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Then her reply came through. I expected that. Of course she did. I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. Don't respond emotionally. That's what they want. I exhaled slowly. Another message. We move forward as planned. Planned. That word again. But this time, it didn't scare me. Because for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't the only one thinking ahead. I put my phone down and leaned back against the wall. Downstairs, I could hear voices again. Fainting. Always waiting. But now, so was I. And this time, I knew exactly what they were doing. They were trying to break me. They just didn't realize. I wasn't the only one in this story who had already prepared for it. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Not the ones from unknown numbers. Not the ones from family. Not even the ones that tried to sound kind. Because now I understood something. Every response was a mistake. They didn't need my answer. They needed my reaction. And I wasn't going to give them one. The next morning, I went downstairs like nothing had changed. Same routine, same quiet house. Same people pretending everything was normal. My stepmother was at the counter, scrolling through her phone. My dad was already dressed for work. Morning, I said. Morning, my dad replied. He looked at me this time, really looked. Like he was trying to figure something out. I held his gaze for a second longer than usual. Then I looked away. That was new. Before, I avoided eye contact. Now, I didn't. And he noticed. That mattered. My stepmother didn't say anything, but I could feel it. She was watching me. Not like before. Before she watched me like I was predictable. Now, she was trying to read me. That meant something had shifted. Good. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table. The same table. The same spot. The paper wasn't there anymore. But the space it had taken still felt occupied. We should probably talk again tonight, my stepmother said casually, not looking up from her phone. Not a question. I took a sip of water. About what? She glanced at me. Brief, sharp. The paperwork, she said. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said, we can talk. That was all. No resistance. No argument. Just agreement, and that was the first move. Because people expect resistance. They prepare for it. They know how to push against it. What they don't expect is silence. Or worsen. My dad frowned slightly. Not because of what I said. Because of how easily I said it. He didn't trust it. Good. After breakfast, I grabbed my bag and left for school. But I didn't go to class right away. Instead, I sat in the library. The quiet section, the one no one used before first period. I pulled out my phone, opened my messages, and started taking screenshots, every text, every numbered. Then I organized them. Dates. Times. Order, not because I needed them now. Because I might need them later. That was the second move. By the time first period started, I had everything saved, backed up, documented. Control. That's what this was about now, not reacting, controlling. At lunch, Tessa sat across from me again. She studied my face for a second. You're different today, she said. I shrugged. Am I? She nodded. "You're not stressed," she said. "You're calm." I looked down at my tray. "I think I just figured something out," I said. "What?" I paused, then shook my head. "Nothing I can explain yet." She didn't push again. That mattered. After school, I walked home slower than usual. Not because I was avoiding anything, because I was thinking about timing, about pressure, about what they would do next. By the time I reached the house, I already knew. They wouldn't stop. They would escalate. Which meant, so would I inside. Quiet. Waiting. My stepmother was in the living room. Laptop open. Papers beside her. Working. Or pretending to. She looked up when I walked in. "Hey," she said. "Hey." I dropped my bag by the stairs. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I walked over and sat down across from her, close, not defensive, not distant, engaged. That caught her off guard, just slightly. "You wanted to talk tonight," I said. She closed her laptop slowly. "Yes. I've been thinking about it," I added. Now she was paying full attention. "Good. And?" she asked. "I get why you're asking," I said. That wasn't a lie. "I do," I added. "It makes sense." Her shoulders relaxed. Just a little. That was the third move. Let them think you understand. Let them think you're coming closer. Because the closer they think you are, the less careful they become. "We're not trying to take anything from you," she said quickly. "We just want what's fair." "Fair." I nodded. "I know," I said. Another small shift. She believed it, or at least, she wanted to. My dad walked in a few minutes later. He looked between us, confused. "What's going on?" he asked. "We're talking," my stepmother said. He looked at me. I met his eyes. "Calm." I told her. "I've been thinking about it," I said. That was all. But it was enough. Because suddenly, everything changed. The tension in the room didn't disappear. It shifted from pressure, and expectation is easier to control. I stood up. "I just need to understand everything clearly," I added, "before I decide." That word again. Decide. Now it sounded like it belonged to me, not them. My dad nodded slowly. "That's fair," he said. My stepmother didn't speak. But I could see it in her eyes. She thought she was getting closer. She thought the plan was working. She didn't realize I was the one moving now. Later that night, I sat on my bed with my phone in my hand. I opened my messages, scrolled to Drayton, and typed, "I think they're going to push harder tonight." I hit send. Her reply came quickly. "Good." I blinked. Then another message appeared. "That means they're getting impatient." Another pause. Then, "Impatience leads to mistakes." I stared at the screen. And for the first time since this started, I smiled. Because now, this wasn't just about holding my ground. It was about letting them make the wrong move. And being ready when they did. That night, they didn't bring the paper back out. And that told me everything. They weren't ready to push directly again. Not yet. They were waiting. Which meant, they were planning something else. I stayed in my room longer than usual, not hiding, listening. Downstairs, their voices carried through the floor. Low, controlled. But sharper than before. "She's stalling," my stepmother said. "She said she needs time," my dad replied. "That's not the same thing," she snapped. Then, "We can't keep waiting," she added. "The tuition deadline is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. There it was. The first real deadline. Not emotional, not vague, specific. That mattered. Because now I knew exactly how long they thought they had. And how fast they were going to start pushing. "Don't rush her," my dad said quietly. "She's already suspicious." Suspicious. I almost smiled at that. Aware. "That's exactly why we need to move faster," my stepmother replied, "before she talks to someone." Too late. I stepped back from the door. That was the fourth move. They were afraid of one thing. Outside help. Which meant. That was exactly where my power was. I walked back to my bed, picked up my phone, and opened my messages. No new texts. Not yet. Good, because the next part wasn't about reacting. It was about timing. I typed "E." They mentioned a deadline. 3 weeks send. The reply came faster this time. That confirms it. I frowned slightly. Typed "Vamps, what?" A pause. Then, "They're under financial pressure." I stared at the screen. Of course they were. But hearing it like that, clear, direct, changed something. Another message came through. "Pressure makes people careless." I leaned back against the wall, careless. That word mattered. Because careful people hide things. Careless people don't. Another message appeared. Finally. "When?" I typed. "Saturday with your aunt." I exhaled slowly. 2 days. That was enough. "Bring everything you have," she added, messages, details, anything that shows pressure. I glanced at my phone. Screenshots. Proof. Already done. "Okay." I typed. The conversation ended there. Simple. Focused. Controlled, exactly how this needed to be. The next day, the pressure changed, not louder, smarter. When I came home from school, my dad was waiting in the living room alone. That was new. He stood up when I walked in. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He hesitated. Then, "Not, we need to talk. Just, can we talk?" That mattered. I nodded. "Yeah." We sat down. Not at the table. On the couch. Less formal. More personal. Or at least, that's what he was trying to make it feel like. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't want this to turn into something bigger than it needs to be," he said. There it was. Minimizing. I stayed quiet. "That paper," he continued. "It's not about taking anything from you." I almost said something. But I didn't. Because I'd already learned. Interrupting doesn't help. Letting people talk does. "It's just about managing things," he added. Managing. Another soft word. Another way to make something permanent sound temporary. "You're still young," he said. "You don't need to handle all of this alone." Alone. I looked at him. "I'm not alone," I said quietly. That made him pause, just for a second. Then, "You know what I mean." He said I did. He meant, "Not with him. That money." He continued, "It's sitting there doing nothing right now." Not true. But I let him keep going. "We could use it," he said. "For everyone." Everyone. I nodded slowly. "Who's everyone?" I asked. That stopped him. Not completely. "But enough use," he said. I held his gaze. I asked. A pause. "You too," he said quickly, too quickly. There it was again. Not a lie, but not the truth either. I leaned back slightly. "I just want to understand something," I said. He nodded. "If I sign that paper," I continued, "what happens next?" Nugger this time. "We handle things?" he said. Handle things. Still vague. Still careful. "Specifically," I said. He shifted. "That depends," he replied, and that was the answer, because people who don't have a plan say, "Depends." I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. He looked at me, confused. "That's it?" he asked. "For now." That was the fifth move. Give them just enough. Enough to think you're still considering it. Enough to keep them talking. But not enough to lose control. That night I sat in my room again. Same position. Same silence. But everything felt different. Clearer. They were running out of time. And they knew it. Which meant they were going to push harder. And harder pressure leads to bigger mistakes. I opened my phone. Scrolled back to the screenshots. The messages. The calls. The pressure. Then I opened a new note. And started writing. Dates. Details. Conversations. Everything. Not because I needed it now. Because I might need it soon. Because this wasn't just a family issue anymore. This was evidence. I stopped writing for a second. Looked at the screen. Then typed one more line. "They're getting impatient." I stared at it. Then saved the note. Closed my phone. And leaned back against the wall. Saturday was coming. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't waiting for them to make the next move. I was ready for it. Because they thought this was about pressure. They thought this was about convincing me. They were wrong. This was about something else now. Something they didn't see coming. Because while they were trying to figure out how to take control, my mom had already decided where the line was. And they had just crossed it. Saturday came faster than I expected. Not because time moved quickly. Because everything in between felt intentional. Every word, every look, every silence, they were waiting, so was I. Aunt June picked me up just after 10. She didn't ask questions right away, just glanced at me once as I got into the car. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. Yeah, she didn't believe me, but she didn't push either. That was her way. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then, "They contacted me," she said. I looked over. "When?" I asked. "Thursday," she replied. "Your stepmother called." Of course she did. What did she say? June let out a quiet breath. "She wanted to know if I'd talk to you," she said. "And if I could help you understand the situation. Help me understand." I almost smiled. "And?" I asked. I told her. June said calmly. "That I trusted you to understand it just fine on your own." That mattered. More than she probably knew. We pulled into a small parking lot 10 minutes later. The building wasn't impressive. No glass walls. No big sign. Just a simple office above a hardware store. If you didn't know what was inside, you'd miss it. But my mom hadn't. That told me everything. Inside, the air smelled like paper and coffee. Quiet, organized, controlled. Patricia Drayton was already waiting. She stood as we walked in. "Good morning." "Morgan," she said, not formal, not distant, just steady. We sat down in a small conference room, no decorations, no distractions, just a table. 3 chairs, and a folder in front of her. That folder felt heavier than it should have. "Let's start with what's changed," she said. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshots, and slid it across the table. She didn't react right away, just studied them, one by one. Different numbers, same pressure. Then she nodded. "Good," she said. I frowned slightly. "Good. Yes," she replied. Helps. Of course it did. Because this wasn't just a story anymore. This was documentation. "They've moved from direct pressure to indirect influence," she continued. "That's escalation." I leaned forward slightly. "Is that bad?" I asked. "For them," she said. "Les." She closed the folder slowly. "Because now," she added, "they're creating a pattern." Pattern. That word again. "And patterns," she said, her easy to prove. Something clicked into place. "They're making a mistake," I said. "Yes," she replied. "And we're going to let them." Let them. That felt different. Not defensive. Strategic. She reached into the folder and pulled out a document. "This," she said, sliding it toward me, "is your trust agreement." I looked down at it. Real paper. Real signatures. Not like the one on the table. This one felt solid. "Your mother set this up 18 months before she passed," Drayton continued. "She was very specific about the terms." I nodded. "She didn't just protect the money," she added. "She protected you from them." There it was. Clear, simple. Final. My chest tightened slightly. "She knew this could happen?" I asked. Drayton met my eyes. "She knew your father," she said. That was enough. "She also included instructions," she added. "Instructions? For what?" I asked. "For this situation," she replied. I sat back slightly. "Of course she did. She anticipated pressure," Drayton continued. "Which means we don't react emotionally." I nodded. "We document. We wait. The right moment." "When is that?" I asked. She paused. "Then, when they push too far." Too far. "The calls. The deadline. They're close," I said. She nodded. "I agree." Silence settled in the room for a moment. Then she leaned forward slightly. "There's one more thing," she said. Her tone changed, not softer, sharper. If they ask you to sign again, she said. I blinked. What? Not actually sign? She clarified, but let them believe you might. I stared at her. Why? Because, she said calmly, people reveal the most when they think they're about to win. That made sense. Dangerous sense. They'll explain more, she continued. They'll show more. They'll get careless. Careless. That word again. And when they do, she said, well, be ready. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't just defense anymore. This was a setup. A trap. Do you feel comfortable doing that? She asked. I thought about it. About the paper. About the way they looked at me. Then I nodded. Yeah, good, she said. Then she added, because once they cross the line, we don't warn them. I held her gaze. What happens then? She didn't hesitate. We stop them. Simple, final. No drama, just control. We spent the next hour going over everything. What not to say. What to watch for, small details, tone. Timing. Everything mattered. By the time we left, I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew exactly what I was doing. And more importantly, why. The drive back was quiet, but different, not heavy, focused. They're not going to see it coming? June said as we pulled up to the house. I nodded. No, I said. They won't. I got out of the car and stood there for a second, looking at the house. The same house. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Because now, I wasn't walking into their plan, I was walking into mine. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. My stepmother was in the kitchen. My dad in the living room, waiting. Of course they were. Hey, she said, like nothing had changed. Hey. I set my bag down slowly, then looked at her. I've been thinking about it, I said. That got her attention. And, she asked. I paused. Just long enough. Then. Maybe we should talk about it again tonight. Silence. Then, a smile. Real this time. Because she thought this was it. She thought I was finally giving in. She didn't realize. This wasn't the moment she was waiting for. This was the one she should have been afraid of. The table looked exactly the same. Same plates, same chairs, same quiet, like nothing had changed. But everything had. My dad was already sitting when I walked in. My stepmother stood by the counter, finishing something in the kitchen. They both looked up. Waiting again. I took my seat across from them. This time, I didn't hesitate. I've been thinking about it, I said. The words landed exactly how I wanted them to. Soft, calm, controlled. My stepmother turned fully toward me, and, she asked. I looked down at the table for a second. Like I was choosing my words carefully. I think I understand now, I said. That was the moment everything shifted. Not visibly. But enough. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. My dad leaned back in his chair, relief. Too early. That's good, she said. I nodded slowly. You were right, I added. It makes sense, helping the family. There it was. Exactly what she wanted to hear, and she took it. Of course she did. I'm glad you see it that way, she said, her tone softer now. We just want what's fair. Fair. That word again, I let it sit. Then I looked at my dad. He didn't say anything, but I could see it. The hesitation, small. But there. Good. I just want to make sure I understand everything before I sign. I said that word. Sign. Now it sounded like a step. Not a decision. Of course, my stepmother said quickly. Ask whatever you want. That was the opening. I leaned back slightly. If I sign, I said. Who control question? Direct. She didn't hesitate. We would manage it, she said. We. Both of you, I asked. Yes. Still confident, still controlled. And I wouldn't have access anymore, I asked. A pause. Small, but real. You'd still benefit from it, she said. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. I let a few seconds pass. Then, what about the trust terms, I asked. That made her shift. What about them? She replied. My mom set conditions, I said. Would those still apply? Another pause, longer this time. They can be adjusted, she said carefully. Adjusted, not followed. That mattered. I looked down for a second, like I was thinking it through. Then I asked, have you already talked to someone about that? That was the real question. She didn't answer right away. And that silence said more than anything else. We've looked into options, she said finally, options. Which meant plans. Which meant this wasn't new. This had been building. Exactly like I thought. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said again. Then I reached into my bag and pulled something out, not the envelope, not yet, just a folded piece of paper. I placed it on the table, between us. My stepmother's eyes dropped to it immediately. What's that? She asked. Just something I wanted to go over, I said. She didn't touch it, but she leaned forward, so did my dad. Curiosity, expectation, both exactly where I needed them. It's just a few notes, I said. Things I wanted to understand before I sign. Before I sign, I kept repeating it, letting it settle, letting them believe it. My dad asked. I looked at him. Then back at the paper. Just details. I said. I unfolded it slowly, not rushing. Then I glanced up. You said this was about helping the family. I continued. Yes, my stepmother said, confident again. Then I just want to be clear on something, I added. I met her eyes. If I don't sign? The room went still. What happens? There it was. The question they didn't want to answer. My dad shifted. My stepmother didn't. She held my gaze. Then, that's not really the situation we're in, she said. Avoidance. Again I nodded slightly. But if it was said, silence, heavy, then it would make things difficult, she replied. Not impossible, not illegal, just difficult. I'm difficult how? I asked. Another pause. My dad looked at her, waiting, just like before. That pattern again. She exhaled slowly. Well, she said, it would put pressure on the household. Pressure. There are things we wouldn't be able to afford, she added. I nodded. And that would be my responsibility? I asked. That one landed. My dad looked at me, really looked. And for a second, something in his expression cracked. Not fully, but enough. That's not what we're saying, he said quickly. But it was, we all knew it. Then I nodded again. Okay, I said quietly. I folded the paper back up. Calm, controlled, like nothing had happened. But everything had, because now, they had said it. Not directly, but clearly enough, and that was all I needed. I think I just need one more day, I said. My stepmother's eyes narrowed slightly. 1 day, she repeated. I nodded. Just to think everything through. She studied me, trying to read something, anything. But I gave her nothing. After a few seconds, she nodded. All right, she said. But this time, there was tension in it, because something felt off. She just couldn't see what. Yet, I stood up, polite, calm, and walked out of the room. Behind me, the silence stayed, heavy, unfinished, exactly where I wanted it. Upstairs. I closed my door, locked it, then reached into my bag again, and this time, I pulled out the envelope. The one I hadn't shown them. Not yet. I held it in my hands for a moment, felt its weight, then set it down on my desk. Tomorrow. That was the moment, because tonight. They thought they were close. They thought they were winning. They thought all they needed was one more push. They were wrong. They had already said enough now. It was my turn. The room was already set. Same table, same chairs, same silence. But this time, no one was pretending. My stepmother sat straight, hands folded on the table. My dad stood near the wall, not sitting this time, waiting. I walked in slowly, closed the door behind me, and for a second, no one spoke. Then I placed the envelope on the table, right between us. Not rushed. Less deliberate. What's that? My stepmother asked. Her voice was steady, but not relaxed. This, I said quietly, is something my mom left. My dad's eyes dropped to the envelope. Something shifted in his face. Recognition. Or maybe, memory. She wanted it opened at the right time, I added. My stepmother let out a small breath. And this is the right time, she asked. I looked at her. Then at my dad. Yes? Silence again. Then I picked up the envelope, ran my thumb along the edge and opened it. The sound was soft. But in that room, it felt loud. I pulled out a single folded sheet. No legal stamp, no official header, just handwriting. My mom's. I held it for a second. Then I started reading. Richard. My dad flinched, just slightly. But I saw it. If you're hearing this. Then something happened exactly the way I thought it would. The room went still. I don't write this out of anger. I'm writing it because I know you. My dad's hand moved to the back of his neck. That old habit. The one he used when he didn't want to hear something. You're not a bad man. But you've always been a weak one. My stepmother shifted in her chair. Not comfortable anymore. And weakness doesn't look dangerous at first. It looks reasonable. It sounds like compromise. I didn't look up. I kept reading. But over time, it becomes something else. It becomes the reason you stop protecting the people who need you. My dad's breathing changed. Slower. He wasn't interrupting. He couldn't. I've watched you do this before. Not just with me. That line landed. Heavy. You convince yourself you're doing the right thing because it's easier than doing the hard one. Silence. No movement. Just the weight of it. And one day, you wake up and realize you didn't stand up for anything. You just went along with whoever was standing next to you. I paused for half a second. Then continued. I know you're going to build a new life. I know there will be someone else. And I know that person will look at what I left behind and see something they can use. My stepmother's fingers tightened slightly. She didn't speak. But she knew. And I know you, Richard. I know you'll let them. That was the line, that one. That broke something. My dad looked down. Not at the table. At the floor. Like he couldn't hold it anymore. I kept going. So I made sure you couldn't. I let that sit. Then finished. Everything I built for our daughter is protected. Not because I don't trust her. But because I don't trust you to protect her when it matters. No one moved. No one spoke. This isn't punishment, it's preparation. My voice stayed steady, even as my chest tightened. Because she deserves at least one parent who plans for her future, instead of asking her to sacrifice it. I looked up for the first time. At my dad. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were closed. Don't ask her to give this up. Don't make her carry the weight of your choices. I swallowed. Then read the last line. If you do, then you already know what that says about you. Silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't break. The kind that settles. I folded the letter slowly, placed it back on the table. No rush, no reaction. Because there didn't need to be one. Everything that needed to be said had already been said. My stepmother stood up first. Fast. This is. She started. Then stopped. Because there was nothing she could say. Not after that. My dad didn't move. He was still standing. Still staring at the floor. Like something had finally caught up to him. I watched him for a second. Then, I picked up the envelope, held it in my hand, and turned toward the door. Quiet, rough. I stopped. But I didn't turn around. I didn't know, he said. The words felt small, late, but real. Then opened them. You did, I said softly, and this time, I walked out, no anger, no shouting, just done. Behind me, the room stayed silent. Because some truths don't need arguments, they don't need explanations, they just need to be heard. And once they are, there's nothing left to defend. The house didn't feel the same after that night. Not louder, not quieter, Just different. Like something had shifted under the surface, and now nothing was sitting right anymore. The next morning, no one said anything. Not at breakfast. Not in the hallway, nothing. My stepmother moved around the kitchen like she always did. Coffee, dishes, phone in her hand. But she didn't look at me. Not once. That was new before. She always looked, measured, calculated now. She avoided it. Like eye contact itself meant something. My dad sat at the table, same chair. But he wasn't eating, just staring at his coffee, like he'd forgotten what to do with it. Morning, I said. He looked up. Slowly morning. His voice was different, lower. Not weak, but not steady either. I sat down, no one spoke, not about last night. Not about the letter. Not about anything. And somehow, that said more than anything they could have said. I finished my breakfast, stood up, and walked out. No argument, no tension, just distance. That day at school, everything felt lighter. Not because the problem was gone, but because it wasn't mine anymore. For the first time since this started, I wasn't carrying it. They were. When I got home, the house was empty. No movement, just silence. Real silence. I dropped my bag and walked into the living room. The same couch, the same table. But it didn't feel like their space anymore. Not completely. My phone buzzed. A message. From Aunt June. How did it go? For a second. Then tied it. 3 dots appeared. Then. And. I paused. Looked around the empty room. I think he finally heard her. No long explanation. No details. Just the truth. Her reply came a few seconds later. That's enough. I locked my phone, and for the first time it actually felt like it was. That night the house stayed quiet again. No dinner conversation. Just separate rooms. Separate thoughts. Around 10 I heard a knock on my door, soft. Not like before. Yeah, I said. The door opened slightly. My dad stood there. Not inside, just at the edge. Like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to come in. Can we talk? He asked. I looked at him for a second, then nodded. Okay. He stepped inside slowly, closed the door behind him, but not all the way, still leaving space. We both stood there for a moment. Then he spoke. I read it again, he said. I didn't respond. I didn't remember half of the things she said, he added. You remember what you want to remember, I said quietly. He nodded. Yeah. Silence again. Then, she was right, he said. Simple, direct, no defense, no excuses. That mattered more than anything else he could have said. I should have been there, he added. Not loud. Not dramatic, just honest. I looked at him. For a second, I didn't see the man from the table. I saw someone else. Too late. I can't fix it, he said. No, I replied. He nodded again. I know. Another pause. Then, I'm not gonna ask you about the money anymore. That line landed. Because it was the first real boundary he respected. I shouldn't have asked in the first place, he added. No argument, no denial, just acceptance. And that changed everything. Not the past, but the direction. I leaned back against the wall. Okay? I said. That was it. No forgiveness. No emotional speech, just acknowledgement. Because that's how real things work. They don't resolve in one moment, they shift, slowly. I don't expect anything from you, he said. I know. Then, I just wanted you to know I'm trying, a small word. But this time, it didn't sound like an excuse. It sounded like the beginning of something. Maybe, he nodded once. Then turned and walked out. Quietly. Like he didn't want to take up more space than he already had. I stood there for a second, then sat down on my bed. The room felt different. Not safe. Not yet, but not heavy either, somewhere in between. And for now, that was enough. Downstairs I heard the front door open, then close. My stepmother. Leaving. No words. No goodbye. Just gone. I didn't go downstairs, I didn't need to, because I already knew what had happened. The plan had fallen apart. Not with a fight, not with a scene, but with something much harder to argue with, the truth. And once that was said out loud, there was nothing left to hold it together. I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had changed, and everything that hadn't. The house was still the same, but the roles inside it weren't. Because for the first time, no one was asking me to give something up, and no one was telling me what I owed, and that silence felt different now. It didn't feel like pressure, it felt like space, the kind you get when something finally ends, and something else, quietly, begins. The house stayed quiet for a few days after that, not tense, not broken, just settled, like something had finally stopped moving. My stepmother didn't come back that night, or the next, no messages, no calls, just absence. My dad didn't ask where she was, and I didn't ask him. Some things don't need to be explained, they show themselves. The kitchen felt different without her, less controlled, less watched. The small things changed first. The light stayed on longer. The TV stayed off. The air didn't feel like it was waiting for something to happen. It just existed. And for the first time, so did I. That weekend, I sat at the same table again, not because I had to, because I chose to. My dad was there, reading something, not his phone, a piece of paper, the letter. Again, he looked up when I sat down. We didn't speak right away. We didn't need to. "I've read it 4 times, he said after a while. I nodded. "I don't think I understood it the first time," he added. "That's how truth works," I said quietly. "It takes time to land." He gave a small nod, then folded the paper carefully. Not rushed, not careless. Like it mattered now. "I spoke to someone," he said. I looked at him. "A counselor," he added, "just to understand some things." I didn't respond right away. Not because it didn't matter. Because it did. More than anything he'd said before. "That's good," I said finally. He nodded. "I should have done that a long time ago." "Yes, but I didn't say it, because we both already knew." There was a pause. Then, "She's not coming back," he said, not angry, not bitter, just final. I looked at him. "Okay," I said. That was enough. No questions. No curiosity. Because the reason didn't matter anymore. The outcome did. He exhaled slowly. "I don't expect things to just." He stopped, searching for the right word. "Fix themselves." "They won't," I said. He nodded again. I know, another silence. But this one felt different. Not heavy, not uncomfortable, just honest. "I'm not going to ask you for anything," he said. "I know. And I'm not going to pretend like I didn't." He paused. "Like I didn't fail you." That word. Fail, it didn't sound defensive, it didn't sound forced, it sounded accurate. I looked down at the table, ran my fingers lightly across the surface. Same table. But it didn't feel like the same place anymore. "I'm not looking for an apology," I said. He didn't move. "I'm just not giving anything away anymore." That was the line. Simple. Mine. He nodded slowly. "Fair. This time." It meant something different. We sat there for a few more minutes. Not talking. Not avoiding. Then I stood up. "I'm going out," I said. "Okay?" No questions. No checking, just space. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter, not heavier, just open. I walked without a destination at first, just letting my feet decide where to go. And for the first time in weeks, no one was waiting for me to decide something. No one was watching. No one was asking. I reached the park a few blocks away and sat on a bench. Pulled out the envelope. The one I had carried through all of this. The one that had held everything together. I opened it again. Not to read it. Just to hold it. To feel it. Then I folded it carefully and placed it back. Not as defense, but as something else. Something finished. My phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. I stared at it for a second, then opened it. You think you won? No name, no need, I knew who it was. I didn't reply. I didn't block it, I just locked my phone. Because this was the part people don't understand. Winning doesn't always look like something. Sometimes, it looks like nothing. No fight, no revenge, no need to prove anything. I sat there for a while longer, watching people walk by, talking, laughing, living, and it felt normal in a way it hadn't in a long time. I stood up, started walking back. Not to the same place, but to a different version of it. The house was still there. The table was still there. My dad was still there. But the pressure wasn't. The expectation wasn't. The control wasn't. And I wasn't the same person who had sat at that table the first night. Because this time, I didn't sit down out of obligation. I didn't listen out of fear. And I didn't stay quiet because I didn't know what to say. I stayed quiet because I didn't need to say anything at all. Upstairs, I placed the envelope in my drawer. Not hidden, not locked away, just there, where it belonged. Not as a weapon, not as a reminder, but as proof that someone had seen this coming and made sure I wouldn't have to fight it alone. I sat on my bed, looked around the room. The same walls, the same space, but it felt different now, because it was mine, not something I had to defend, not something I had to give up, just mine. And for the first time, that was enough. Not because everything was fixed, not because everything was forgiven, but because something had finally changed. I didn't lose anything. I just stopped giving it away.